There's a reason that it's endured as long as it has and has the popularity that it has. If you have questions, please feel free to email us podcast@verse.fit. Otherwise, you can comment below or just like our podcast. Welcome to the Verse Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Robert, and we are back once again with a Q&A episode. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. It makes it a lot easier to do a Q&A episode. Our first question today comes from Sarah. Sarah says, "Hey there, I'm a 39-year-old mom of two trying to get back into shape." That's awesome. "I only have about 30 minutes a day and I'm torn between doing cardio or lifting weights. If I'm trying to lose fat and tone up, which should I prioritize?" Well, I'm going to say you can do both. I don't know how many days per week you intend to exercise, but if it's every day, if you have 30 minutes every day, which it's, you say, I only have about 30 minutes a day, so maybe you do, I'm not sure. But if you have every day, there's no reason you can't do a little bit of both. You could lift 3 days a week and do cardio 3 days a week. If you don't have every day, and let's say you only have 3 days a week to exercise, I am always going to err on the side of lifting weights. You're going to build muscle, which will in turn build greater metabolism and allow you to eat more calories or have less fat at the same caloric intake. It's also going to make you stronger. At 39, you're starting to come into that age when muscle really matters, whether you're a man or a woman, but especially for women in that perimenopausal period. That's when you really start to need the metabolic machinery that muscle creates. For anyone 40 and older is when you start to get into that age range when you potentially can start losing muscle. If you want to age gracefully and have a lot of ability as an older person, you need the muscle. And doing it now and building muscle is going to be a lot easier than in 10 years or 20 years. I would always say lift. But let me also make the caveat, just because you're lifting doesn't mean you can't get a cardio benefit from that. You can superset things, you can do circuits, you can do shorter rest periods, you can do a lot of ways of training, set up your training in a lot of ways that gives you a cardiovascular benefit. It keeps your heart rate raised. One of the first training systems that was really popular with athletes in the early 1960s was called peripheral heart training. It was a type of circuit training that worked like different regions of the body. The idea was that your blood had to shoot back and forth between extremities of your body. You do shoulder exercise and then a quad exercise and then a back exercise and then a hamstring exercise. Whether the blood shifting back and forth really mattered is irrelevant because you would rest only the amount of time it took to go from exercise to exercise. That's not a long time, and you're keeping your heart rate elevated over that entire period. You can also use complexes. I've written about complexes in our blog, which you can check out at verse.fit. They're essentially a series of exercises back to back using the same tool or implements. It could be a barbell, a kettlebell, a dumbbell, or 2 dumbbells. You could even argue that body weight is a complex, although that's really more like a circuit in a way. But a complex, like you could take a barbell and do 10 deadlifts followed by 10 bent over rows, followed by 10 upright rows or some kind of clean, 10 front squats, 10 presses, 10 back squats, 10 good mornings, or whatever the reps and whatever the exercises, you could choose them. You just put them in a logical kind of sequence that flow one into the other. And that's a massive cardio hit. You'll be so out of breath using even incredibly light weights. Don't necessarily think that just because you're lifting doesn't mean you can't get a cardio benefit. Some of that stuff seems too intimidating. I'm all for sleds. You can load up a sled, push that thing. It can be heavy and you can go for shorter distance, or it can be light and you can go for longer distance or faster. You're going to get much stronger legs from that. Your upper body gets worked out as well as your heart. There's a lot of ways to get a crossover of the two, Sarah, and I wouldn't necessarily say that you have to do one or the other. But if you did, again, I would always err on the side of lifting. I think there's going to be a lot more benefit long term to all of the muscle that you can build from lifting. All right, let's see. The next question is from Jake. Jake says, "I've just started powerlifting and I'm a bit confused about how often I should be testing my 1 rep max. I want to track progress, but also don't want to burn out or risk injury. What's a good rule of thumb for testing maxes?" When you have a meet, you're a beginner, so right now you should be building as big a base as possible. If you have a meet, you should be going through a training program that logically concludes with a heavy 1 rep max attempt. Ideally, that would be probably 12 weeks, maybe 16 weeks, something like that. Give you a long time to build up that base. I think you can do heavy single, say 85% of a max, to get used to doing singles, building up the skill of doing singles, of which that absolutely is a skill, but most of your strength is actually going to be built with those more moderate rep ranges of 3 to 8 in the 70 to 85% zone. That's where the majority of your work should be, and that's where you're going to get strong. How often should you test a max? I don't think a beginner really should until you're at that meet. That's the whole point of an advanced person might need that stimulation a bit more frequently. And that's where you can get something like a West Side barbell system that uses frequent maxing. But even that, it's rotating the exercises every time you do it so that at least you're not getting any kind of overuse or injuries or accommodation. So how often you should max on the traditional 3 power lift, squat, bench, and deadlift, really just at that meet. That's really my opinion. The rest of the time should be building. And if you need to do some singles, go for it, but they should definitely not be maximal. 85, 90, something like that maybe. But that's my opinion, Jake. Not often. All right. Question number 3 is from Maya. Maya says, I follow a low-carb, plant-based diet. How does that work? And train CrossFit 5 to 6 times a week. Sometimes I feel gassed midway through workouts. Could I be missing something nutritionally? Maya, I don't even know what you eat. If you're eating plant-based, okay, great. But if it's low carb, what's left? Some nuts, vegetables, and olive oil? You gotta eat food. If you're on plant-based, you gotta have carbs. That's where the majority of your energy is gonna come from. If you're full-on vegan, which I don't know if that's the case, then you definitely need to be eating quinoa because the protein is actually a pretty highly bioavailable and complete protein. Beans, lower quality protein there, especially mixed with rice. You're going to need these just to get your daily protein. If you are fully vegan, yeah, you can have fat for energy, but even then, unless you're eating like pounds of nuts a day, I don't even know how you would get enough fat for that energy, and your protein is going to be wildly deficient. I suppose you could be taking a pea protein powder or something to get the protein in, but you'd have to be drinking a lot of pea protein, and again, it's not the best protein. Pea protein is not an ideal protein source. The quinoa is the better choice, but put that aside so I can address your question specifically. Are you missing something? Yeah, carbs. If you're doing CrossFit 5 to 6 days a week, that is a carb-fueled activity. You need carbs for that. Your body wants that to do that work. It wants those carbs. I don't even know where an idea like this would come from. I am going to assume that it's from a health-oriented perspective, that you've gotten the message that carbs aren't good for you and that plant-based is very healthy in the ideal diet, which I won't spend time discussing whether that's true or not, but you can't have low carbs and do a very high energy output activity like CrossFit. All of those muscle contractions are fueled by carbs. So I'm not surprised if you're feeling tired. If you want to perform in CrossFit, you're going to either need to not eat plant-based or not eat low carb. And honestly, of the two, not eating low carb, you're going to see way more benefit than switching from plant-based, because even if you were eating steaks and proteins and stuff, you're going to want those carbs. If you're vegan, you can't even have honey if you were to avoid carbs. That's crazy to me. I don't really understand where you got this idea. I would encourage you to transition off of this diet, not just for CrossFit, but for life, because you need to eat food. And if you don't, you will eventually die. So there you go. Okay, let's see. Question 4 is from Greg. I have a stepbrother named Greg, who I've never actually met. Greg says, I'm 58 and pretty active, mostly walking and some light jogging. I've heard strength training is crucial for aging well. You've heard correctly. But I'm not sure where to start. What are the safest and most effective ways for older adults to build strength without risking injury? First off, you're not that old. 58 isn't like so old that you need to train all that differently from anyone else. But I think any beginner, especially a beginner who's a little trepidatious about getting into strength training, there's nothing wrong with machines. As an avowed free weight guy, I'll say that. There's nothing wrong with machines, especially for a beginner. They're designed to be very user-friendly and fairly safe. If you are uncomfortable with even using the machines, one session with a personal trainer or advisor at a gym is probably all you'll need to feel pretty comfortable. The very simple training program that I tell people is go into the gym, sit on that machine, start on the lowest weight option they have. Most of these machines are selectorized where you just put a pin in. Do the lowest weight. After a couple reps, you'll know if it's way too light. And just slowly do a few reps at each level until it starts to feel challenging. Start with about 8 reps. There was when Nautilus machines came out in the 60s and 70s, their high intensity protocol was to do one set all out with a weight that you fail at 8 reps. And then you stick with that weight till you can do 12, a form of double progression. I'm not saying you should go all out to failure. What I am saying though is pick a weight that's relatively challenging, but that you can definitely do for 8 reps. Over time, let's say once a week, try to add a rep or 2 until you can do 12 reps. And then add a little bit of weight, go back to 8. Very simple, just stick to those machines, go down to the next plate. As long as you're pushing to a somewhat challenging level of effort, you will get benefit. You're going to grow muscle, you're going to get stronger. Would I like to see you eventually progress to free weights, be it barbells, kettlebells, dumbbells, whatever? Yeah, absolutely. If all you care about is building a little bit of muscle and aging well, you can absolutely do that with machines. Building muscle at your age is going to be so crucial for 10, 20 years down the line. If you can do that in a way that you can be consistent with, if that's machines, awesome. Use machines. That's my advice, Greg. I hope it helps, and I hope you stick to training and enjoy it. Okay. All right. This question comes from Lauren. Lauren says, what's your take on wearable fitness trackers and calorie tracking apps? Do you think they help with performance and fat loss? I think calorie tracking apps are great. Very few people can successfully intuitively eat. Our food environment is way too corrupted by processed foods and foods that are hyper palatable that we want to overeat. Calorie tracking apps are very useful to know how much you're eating, or at least get a rough idea. Probably it's still inaccurate, but it's better than just trying to eyeball it. Weighing your food, or at least measuring it in some form, is going to be necessary if you do that. I know there are some that you can supposedly take a picture of your plate and it'll estimate the calories. I don't know if they work. I haven't tried them. I'm a little skeptical because how would it know, for example, how much oil is in something, or if certain angles are off, it may not be able to tell the depth or total amount of certain food you're eating and stuff. But there's ways you can measure that aren't measuring cups and tablespoons and things like that. I know Precision Nutrition, John Berardi's company. I actually don't know if he's involved with the company anymore. He might have sold it. But years ago, when I did their certification, they were really big on using markers like size of the palm of your hand, or a deck of cards, or things that you would kind of have a reference for in your head to know how much of something you're having. Keep that in mind. You can't just put food in unless you know roughly how much it is. Obviously, if it's something like McDonald's, you can put in a quarter pounder and it'll put it in there. Ideally, you're not often eating McDonald's, but if you are, at least you're tracking it and you can eat less quarter pounder and lose weight. Calorie tracking apps, I do think, are very useful and aid in fat loss. We've known this forever. In fact, I don't know when the first nutritional table and tracking journal came out, but I know that in the 1920s they had them. So we've known for a long time that it's very useful. I see no problems with using those. As far as fitness trackers, the only utility I really see in most of them is as a step tracker. Even those can overestimate how many steps you're getting. I used to have a Fitbit, and often I would just put it in my pocket because I noticed it would count me moving my arms as steps. Like if I was stirring something in a pot or washing dishes or whatever, it would count those as steps, and I don't want to cheat that. So I would put it in my pocket a lot to get the steps. It wildly overestimates calories burned. That's true of any calorie estimator in my experience. If you go on a treadmill or a piece of cardio equipment, the amount of calories that it estimates you burn in a session are usually vastly inflated. Heart rate, I guess, it's probably okay with heart rate. Although, again, the Fitbit I had, there were some times it just would not register my heart rate. Like, it couldn't track it. If I was on a step mill or something, I would do this workout with a step mill wearing a weight vest. And it just, I don't know what was going on. It couldn't read my heart rate when I did that. Sometimes if I was doing a really high intensity, like complex or heavy squats, it would just sort of blank out on the heart rate, which I'm pretty sure my heart was still beating, but it wasn't registering it. So maybe there's some better ones out there that track heart rate. I'm sure like the Garmin's that were designed specifically for heart rate, I'm sure they're a lot better. I had a Whoop for a while. It tracks heart rate variability and uses that as a guide to help you determine how hard you should go in the gym or if you should go in at all. It does a red light, yellow light, green light kind of thing. Based on the greater variability between your heartbeats, the better your training recovery is, so the harder you can go in the gym. I mean, there's science to heart rate variability that's pretty legit, although it's mostly for endurance and cardio based training more so than weight training. Supposedly it's tracking sleep as well. I question how good those are. When it factors all these things into it, what I found is it basically told me I was never ready to go hard in the gym. I was wearing it at the time that I still had a kid who was waking up at least once a night, if not more, getting up early to get to work for training clients and stuff. So it was always telling me I was in the red or the yellow. And it was like, okay, well, I'm not going to not train for weeks. I have to do something. Despite not being recovered and ready to train, I still made good progress. Would I have made better progress? I suppose I could have, although I don't see how taking 10 days off at a time would really help with that. I'm a little skeptical of some of the fitness trackers outside of steps. I think steps can be useful. That's something that can contribute to fat loss. I'm a big fan of increasing steps as a fat loss tool because it's very low intensity and it's not stressful. In fact, it has an anti-stress effect. I think it enhances creativity. If you can do it outside, ideally, then that's great because you're getting some vitamin D and fresh air. Calorie tracking apps, I'm all for them. Fitness tracking apps, boy, your mileage may vary because mine was not very good on them. That helps. And let's see. Okay, our final question is from Mankamel. Mankamel says, what is your favorite fitness tool? Barbell, kettlebell, bands, dumbbells? There are so many options. I can't decide what I should get. I would say don't limit yourself. Even if budget is an issue, bands are really cheap. There's no reason you couldn't get bands and something else. It sounds like you're going to be doing at-home exercises. I don't think that the adjustable dumbbells are the best investment for an at-home exerciser because typically they're only going to go to about 50, maybe 80, but they're kind of unwieldy and clunky at that time, at that size. Kettlebells are good. You can do a lot with kettlebells, but again, you end up having to buy a lot of kettlebells just so you can progress in some fashion. I'm a pretty dyed-in-the-wool barbell man, you know? You can do so many exercises. You have unlimited progression. If you start with just a simple set, a 45, a 25, a 10, a 5, and a 2.5, you can progress for a long time on a ton of exercises. If that starts to get easy, you don't even have to have a big financial commitment. You can buy just another set of 10s or another set of 25 or something at a time and then have a long time to progress using the additional weight you have there. A barbell, it's tall, it's long, but it really doesn't take up that much space. You can tuck it away against a wall or stand it up in a corner or something. Even if you're just doing floor-based exercises with it, cleans, snatches, deadlifts, rows, curls, floor presses, shoulder presses. You can do higher rep squats by putting it on your shoulders. You don't need a squat rack, although as a maker of a squat rack, getting the Verse Agile rack is a fantastic option. But really any kind of rack that you can put it on, you can make racks out of wood. There's a lot of plans online that you can find. Again, I'll push the Agile rack just because I think it's a really great product and it doesn't take up much space, but you're going to be hard pressed to beat the barbell. There's a reason that it's endured as long as it has and has the popularity that it has. If you could only buy one thing I'd make it a barbell and some weights. If you could buy 2 things, I'd make it a barbell and an agile rack. And if you could buy 3 things, I'd throw some bands on there, because bands allow you to add load and change the strength curve in a very low cost way. They're very cheap and they really don't take up room. That would be my recommendation. If all I ever did for the rest of my life was stuff based on barbells, I'd be pretty jacked and strong. So yeah, that is it for our questions today. Again, to everyone who asked a question, I really appreciate it. It really helps us keep these Q&A podcasts alive, which I enjoy doing. So if you have any questions, please email them to podcast@verse.fit, or you can ask them on Instagram or at Verse Fitness on Instagram. You can ask questions in this YouTube comment section. We'll check that as well. Until then, I hope everyone has a great day.